I never imagined my life would take the path it has. Growing up, I knew of Jesus, but only through the lens of Islam. In my faith and culture, he was a great prophet, revered and honored. I was taught, as many Shia Muslims believe, that Jesus will return one day to judge the world. However, this belief was not universal across all Muslims, and my connection with Christians or their faith was non-existent. At that time, Christianity felt like a distant, foreign world, far removed from my daily life. But in 1998, everything began to change. I was in Dubai, helping with my family's business of importing and exporting goods. A trip to Malaysia for work became necessary, and I found myself staying there for 3 months, far longer than I anticipated. During this time, my brother entrusted me to the care of a kind Malay Indian woman, a family acquaintance. She was gracious and warm, always inviting me to join her in various activities. One day, she suggested I come to church with her. At first, I hesitated. It wasn't something I was accustomed to, and I didn't see the point, but she gently urged me, saying, "You should come. You don't want to offend anyone." Out of politeness more than curiosity, I agreed. I never imagined that a simple gesture of courtesy would lead to a life-altering experience. That Sunday, I stepped into a church for the first time. I felt out of place and uncertain. Yet I noticed something unusual about that day. The church was hosting a guest pastor and his wife, a couple in their 60s or 70s, all the way from Canada. They were warm and approachable, though I didn't yet realize the role they would play in my story. After the service, my friend encouraged me to ask them for prayer. "It's good for you," she said. I was reluctant. My English wasn't great back then, and I felt awkward. But I approached them, and they welcomed me with kindness. They prayed for me, not just a simple prayer, but one filled with purpose and prophecy. As they spoke, I didn't fully understand their words, but I felt something stirring deep within me, something beyond language or culture. That moment stayed with me. It wasn't just their words, it was the love and sincerity behind them. It was as though God Himself was reaching out to me through their prayers. Looking back, I realized that prayer has a universal power. No one rejects prayer because it speaks to something fundamental in the human soul, a longing for connection, for hope, for divine grace. At that time, I had no idea I would one day live in Canada, the very country those pastors were from. It never crossed my mind, but now, as I reflect on that day, I see the threads of God's providence woven throughout my story. What seemed like an accidental encounter was anything but. It was a seed planted in my heart that would grow over time. God's plans often begin in ways we cannot understand, in seemingly small, insignificant moments. A trip for business, a polite invitation, a prayer from strangers, all of it was part of a greater design. When I look back now, I see how God was gently guiding me, step by step, toward a path I never expected. And though my journey is far from over, I know I walk it with His light leading the way. Looking back, I see how God's plan was at work, even in the moments when I dismissed it. That day in the Malaysian church, when the Canadian pastor prayed for me, he spoke words that I didn't understand. He said, "You will go back to your own country, but you will not stay there. You will go to an Arab country. We pray that God will meet you there." At the time, I thought to myself, what is this man talking about? It made no sense to me, so I simply ignored it. But as I've learned, God's plans don't depend on our understanding. I returned to my home country and not long after found myself in Dubai, in the United Arab Emirates. And it was there, in that Arab country, that the words of the pastor began to take shape in my life, though not in the way I expected. Before I left Malaysia, a kind lady gave me 2 gifts, a Bible and a recording tape. I didn't want to offend her, so I accepted them, even though I had no interest in the Bible at the time. It was an English Bible, and I thought, maybe I can use this to improve my English. And the tape? It was a sermon titled "Leaving Your Past Behind," preached by an African pastor. I listened to that tape over and over, trying to pick up the language, not realizing I was also hearing seeds of truth. In Dubai, I met a man who had been a Muslim but had become a Christian. This encounter shook me. I was furious. How could someone abandon the faith of their ancestors? I felt compelled to defend Islam, so I began studying it more intensely, asking questions of religious scholars and seeking answers to challenge him. At the same time, my personal life was taking an unexpected turn. I met a woman named Lucille, a kind and gentle soul from the Philippines. She came from a Catholic background, though she wasn't practicing her faith. We became close, and eventually we married. This decision was met with strong opposition from my family. No one in our family's history had ever married a non-Muslim, and they assumed Lucille had converted me to Christianity. Ironically, the opposite was true. Her faith was nominal at best, while mine was still firmly rooted in Islam. Amid this tension, God brought another couple into our lives, Mark and Malu. Mark had a story that both fascinated and infuriated me. He had been a Muslim, then an atheist, and finally a Christian. Malu had been a Catholic who deepened her faith and became a committed Christian. They invited us to their home, offering hospitality and friendship. Their kindness disarmed me, but I couldn't ignore the anger that welled up inside when I learned of Mark's conversion. I saw it as a betrayal of our shared heritage. To make sense of it all, I threw myself deeper into my own faith, studying more fervently and participating in religious observances like Ashura. I thought that by immersing myself in Islam, I could prove the truth of my beliefs and perhaps even challenge Mark's new faith. But as I look back now, I see that God was patient with me. Through the Bible I read to learn English, through the sermon tape I listened to for language practice, through the people I met and the experiences I lived, He was gently leading me. Every encounter, every challenge, every moment of anger and questioning was part of a greater design, one that I couldn't see at the time but that was unfolding according to His perfect plan. God was using all these pieces, the pastor's prayer, the Bible, the tape, Lucille, Mark and Malu, to prepare my heart. He was meeting me in ways I didn't expect, in places I didn't plan to be, drawing me closer to the truth I had yet to fully grasp. And though the journey was far from over, I can see now that His hand was guiding me all along. I remember standing in the mosque, leading 50 or 60 people. They were gathered for Ashura, mourning a dead imam, beating their chests in grief. It was a solemn moment, steeped in the tradition I had known all my life, but even as I led them, I couldn't shake the questions that had begun to stir within me. Questions I didn't dare voice, not even to myself. This inner turmoil had been building since I met Mark and Malu. Mark's story unsettled me. A former Muslim who had embraced Christianity, his conversion felt like a betrayal of everything I held sacred. Determined to bring him back to Islam, I began studying with even greater fervor, immersing myself in the Quran and preparing my arguments. But something unexpected happened. Mark gave me a gift, the Jesus film, based on the Gospel of Luke. I watched it, thinking it would provide insight to refute Christianity. Instead, it broke me. Every time I watched, I found myself in tears. It wasn't just the story of Jesus, it was the way it pierced through my defenses, the compassion, the love, the sacrifice. It was unlike anything I had encountered before. And so I turned to the Bible, hoping that by studying it, I could better argue against Mark's faith. For 3 months, I wrestled with these texts. But every time I entered Mark's home, something strange happened. I had all my arguments prepared, but the moment I stepped inside, it was as if a wave of peace silenced me. I couldn't speak. The atmosphere was unlike anything I had experienced, what I now recognize as an atmosphere of love. Mark didn't argue with me, he simply prayed for me and spoke to me with kindness and patience. One day, Mark brought his pastor to my house. By then, my confusion had reached a breaking point. I confessed to the pastor, I'm lost. I can't reject Islam, but I can't deny Christianity either. I feel like I have to accept both because they both talk about God. He looked at me and said something that changed everything. No, you can't hold on to both. There's a contradiction between the two. You need to choose the truth. He encouraged me to pray. At first, I resisted. In Islam, we pray 5 times a day, I explained. The prayers are memorized in Arabic. You can't speak to God in your own language. You have to use these set words. But he urged me, why don't you speak to God directly? In your own words? So that night, for the first time, I prayed differently. I looked up at the ceiling, and in my own language I said, God, show me the truth. Show me the truth. It was a simple, desperate plea. For 2 days, I stopped my usual prayers, waiting for an answer. But then fear crept back in, and I returned to my Muslim prayers. After finishing one night, I looked at my wife as she prepared for bed, her own quiet prayers filling the room. I wondered if I would ever find the peace I was seeking. But something had shifted. That simple prayer, God, show me the truth, had opened a door I couldn't close. I didn't realize it yet, but God was answering me. He was leading me, step by step, out of confusion and into clarity. I had asked for the truth, and he was preparing to reveal it in ways I could never have imagined. The tension in my heart was unbearable. 2 worlds, 2 faiths, pulling me in opposite directions. On one side was Islam, the faith I had grown up with, woven into every fiber of my upbringing, culture, and identity. On the other side was the Bible, a book I couldn't ignore, filled with a love so profound it left me speechless. I found myself crying out to God time and again with the same desperate prayer. God, show me the truth. I want to know the truth. Which one is the truth? This wasn't just an intellectual battle, it was a battle for my very soul. To follow the truth meant facing rejection from my family, from my friends, even from the government. It meant losing everything familiar and safe to follow the one who claimed to be the way, the truth, and the life. Could I bear such a cost? Could I truly risk it all for one man? Yet deep in my heart I knew this man, Jesus, was worth everything. One night, as the weight of this decision pressed down on me, I prayed that same prayer again. God, show me the truth. I can't deny what I've seen in the Bible. The love of God is there, but I can't deny the faith I was raised in either. Please, God, show me. That night I went to sleep, still torn, but trusting that God would answer. And he did. In my dream I felt his presence so clearly, so powerfully, that it was unmistakable. When I woke, the sensation lingered, a presence behind me, strong yet gentle, urging me forward. I heard the words deep within my spirit, Med, go forward and do not look back. Those words changed everything. It was as if a veil had been lifted, and I knew what I had to do. From that moment, I stopped looking back. The fear, the doubts, the questions, they began to fade as I stepped into the truth I had been seeking. It wasn't an easy journey, but it was a certain one. And I haven't turned back since. Today, I pass to others, leading them to the same Jesus who transformed my life. The cost was high, loss of relationships, the comfort of cultural belonging, but the reward is beyond compare. To follow Jesus is to walk in the fullness of truth and love, a path that leads not just to life, but to life abundant. As I reflect on my journey, I'm amazed at what God is doing, not just in my life, but in the lives of countless others across the Muslim world. In my home country of Iran, the movement of God's Spirit is undeniable. Hearts are being awakened, lives are being transformed, and the truth is setting people free. This is the God I serve, the one who answers the prayers of those who seek him, the one who meets us in our deepest struggles, and the one who calls us forward into his marvelous light. For his glory, and his glory alone, I walk this path with joy. Reflecting on this journey, I can see now how God's hand was at work through every moment, every prayer, every tear, every step forward. The cost of following Jesus was great, but the reward has been far greater. A life rooted in truth, a peace that surpasses understanding, and the joy of knowing the one who is worth everything. To anyone watching, remember this. The journey to truth is not always easy, but it is always worth it. Wherever you are in your own walk, whether you're wrestling with questions, feeling torn, or searching for purpose, know that God is faithful. If you seek him, he will reveal himself to you in ways you could never imagine. Trust him, take that step forward, and do not look back. Here on Compatibility World, we're dedicated to sharing stories of transformation, connection, and hope, stories that inspire us to grow deeper in faith and understanding. If this story has touched your heart, I invite you to join us on this journey by subscribing to the channel. Click that subscribe button and turn on notifications to stay connected. Together, let's explore the incredible ways God is moving in the world and in our lives.